The world we live in is currently fractured by a double standard so deep and so dark that it threatens the very soul of our humanity. We are talking about a reality where the most innocent among us, our children, have been treated like property, picked like mangoes from a tree to serve the sick desires of a global elite. This is not just a tragedy, it is a systemic failure of every government that claims to stand for liberty and justice for all. For years, we have watched as children were robbed of their innocence, stripped of their freedom, and forced into a life of humiliation and shame, all while the men responsible sat in high-rise offices and palaces, laughing at the laws the rest of us are forced to follow. When we speak about Jeffrey Epstein and the network he built, we are talking about a modern-day Babylon where money is used as a shield against the consequences of pure evil. These billionaires and world leaders behave as if they are gods above the earth, believing that their trillions of dollars grant them a license to abuse, use, and discard human lives. This is a bold and fearless truth. The system is not broken. It is functioning exactly how it was designed by those who want to remain untouchable. In America, we see a heartbreaking lack of dignity among our leadership. Not one leader has possessed the moral courage to stand firmly against this organized abuse and force real, lasting justice for the victims. Instead, we see a theater of silence and protected interests. The hypocrisy of the LAW, the most disgusting part of this reality, is the staggering hypocrisy of the legal system. If you are a common citizen struggling to survive, the government is watching your every move with a magnifying glass. If you are hungry and you steal a loaf of bread from a grocery store to feed your family, you will be arrested, processed, and thrown into a cell. If you are a parent who struggles with an addiction and drinks wine every night in front of your children, the Department of Children and Families will be at your door within hours to label you an unfit parent and threaten to take your family away. The system is incredibly efficient when it comes to punishing the poor, the tired, and the bruised. However, that efficiency disappears the moment a billionaire is involved in a horrendous crime. When the elite are caught in acts of human trafficking and the exploitation of minors, the wheels of justice suddenly stop turning. We see high-profile figures like Prince Andrew, who is linked to these dark circles, escape the true weight of the law while the public is told to look the other way. In America, there have been no massive sweeps, no major arrests of the clients who funded and participated in these atrocities. The system protects its own, allowing these predators to return to their luxury lifestyles while their victims are left to carry the weight of shame and trauma. The arrogance of the elite, these men do not just commit crimes, they mock the very idea of accountability. They feel so far above the world that they often laugh at their victims, calling them liars, and using expensive legal teams to silence those who are brave enough to speak out. This is a mental and spiritual sickness that has infected the highest levels of our society. They believe that because they have earned or inherited massive wealth, they no longer have to answer to the moral laws of God or the statutory laws of man. They have created a world where a child's life is viewed as a commodity to be traded for favors, and it is an absolute abomination. We are told by our leaders what will happen to us if we step out of line, yet they remain silent about the monsters in their own circles. This silence is a choice. It is a choice to prioritize political stability and donor money over the safety of children. When trillions of dollars are at stake, humanity is pushed to the side. We are currently living in a state where all 50 states are feeling the pain of this injustice. We see our taxes being used to fund systems that don't protect us, while the elite continue to manipulate our way of life without any compassion for the suffering they cause. The call for a spiritual reckoning, if there is no accountability, then the system itself has lost its right to govern. We cannot function in a society where the law is a spider web that catches the small flies but lets the big hornets break through. I represent the truth of Jesus, and that truth demands that we stand up for the least of these. We cannot call ourselves a civilized nation while we allow billionaires to get away with the most heinous acts imaginable, We are tired of the BS and the constant excuses. We want to see court dates, we want to see jail cells, and we want to see a total dismantling of the networks that allow this abuse to flourish. We are reaching a breaking point where the people must decide to pause. If the government will not act to protect the children and punish the predators, then the people must refuse to participate in the charade. We want to see a world where dignity is restored and where a person's bank account does not determine their level of innocence. The light is shining on these dark secrets, and it will not be extinguished. We are seeking the truth. We are demanding justice, and we will not stop until the structures of Babylon are brought down and replaced with a foundation of genuine righteousness and protection for the innocent. Ignorance has destroyed humanity for too long. We must learn from the past, from the invasions and the manipulations, to realize that this is all part of the same spirit of control. Those who laughed at the suffering of others are now facing a world that is finally opening its eyes. The victims are not liars. They are the survivors of a war they never asked to fight. It is time for the world to stand with them and ensure that no man, no matter how many trillions he has, is ever allowed to feel above the world again. Please feel free to follow, subscribe, comment, like, and share. This helps you to stay connected to me, and it helps me to remain here creating more content for you. Thank you. Love always, Maria DC Santiago.
There is a dark orchard in this world where the fruit is not fruit at all. It is children, plucked, not with care, not with love, but with greedy hands that believe. Gold coins wash away sin. They were taken like mangoes from a tree, reached for, chosen, twisted from the branch of their childhood before their time to ripen. Their laughter was stolen, their names buried under secrets, their innocence traded in rooms with velvet curtains and locked doors. And somewhere above it all, men in tailored suits raised glasses of expensive wine as if power were permission, as if money were a crown, as if billions in the bank made them kings over the bodies of the small. They believed the world would never touch them because power has a language, one for the poor and one for the powerful. If a hungry mother steals bread, the law arrives like thunder. If a struggling father drinks too much in front of his children, judgment knocks at the door with paperwork and warnings. But when the wealthy build empires from suffering, the thunder grows cards. Files gather dust, questions disappear. Truth is buried under marble floors and guarded gates. And the children who should have been safe, learning, laughing, dreaming, were left carrying shadows far heavier than their years. This is the part that should shake a nation, because justice that bows to money is not justice. A country that protects its billionaires more fiercely than its children has lost its moral compass. A leader worthy of the name would stand like iron in a storm and say, not one child more, not behind palace walls, not on private islands, not in mansions, not anywhere on this earth. Power should fear the cry of a child, wealth should tremble before the truth. Because the measure of a nation is not the size of its fortunes. It is how fiercely it protects the smallest voice from the largest monsters. And one day, when the silence finally breaks and the orchard is no longer hidden, the world will remember who harvested innocence and who had the Have you ever sat in stillness and felt the uneasy weight of tattoos stacking up like storm clouds? Have you noticed how often the loudest accusations fall into sudden silence, how stories that once roared across headlines dissolve into whispers before the truth can fully breathe? I ask these questions, not to provoke chaos, but to awaken clarity. There is something deeply unsettling when individuals who publicly challenged powerful leaders or who were positioned to expose wrongdoing are suddenly gone, their deaths ruled self-inflicted, their voices permanently sealed. When this happens once, it is tragedy. When it happens repeatedly, it demands scrutiny. Patterns are not superstition, patterns are evidence waiting to be acknowledged. Consider the connections surrounding Jeffrey Epstein, a man convicted of exploiting minors, a man tied to the wealthy and influential, a man whose network reached into boardrooms, palaces, and political offices. And yet, after his arrest and subsequent death, so many threads unraveled without resolution. His passing, officially ruled as suicide, closed the door on a courtroom reckoning. But it did not close the door on public responsibility. It did not erase the victims. It did not dissolve the unanswered questions. Why is it that when someone claims to possess information that could implicate powerful figures, their credibility is cut, their character dissected, and sometimes their lives abruptly end? Why does coverage evaporate? Why do certain investigations stall? Why do lawmakers pivot away from uncomfortable discussions as though truth were radioactive? Silence can be as loud as confession. The media, once positioned as watchdogs, sometimes behave like guardians of carefully curated narratives. Stories that could reshape public perception are diluted, redirected, or quietly archived. Anchors change the subject, panels debate trivial distractions. Meanwhile, families who endured trauma are left watching their pain become a footnote. This is not about partisan rivalry. It is about accountability. If credible evidence exists lingering any president, any official, any billionaire to exploitation or abuse, then justice must not discriminate. The law must not tremble before influence. Power should not function as insulation from consequence. When survivors of abuse step forward, they are risking everything. Their reputations, their mental health, their safety, to then see investigations evaporate or defendants shielded by legal maneuvering is a second betrayal. You cannot preach faith in institutions while those institutions appear selectively courageous. Look at the cultural pattern. Outrage erodes, hashtags trend, hearings are promised, documents are sealed, and eventually the public is nudged toward the next spectacle. Distraction is a strategy. Fatigue is cultivated. People are encouraged to move on. But imagine, just for a moment, that it was your child, your niece, your nephew, your friend's daughter. Would you accept silence? Would you shrug at sealed files? Would you tolerate powerful men walking freely while survivors rebuild their lives in the shadows? Of course not. That is why this matters beyond political loyalty. This is about safeguarding the vulnerable. This is about refusing to normalize selective justice. When lawmakers avoid confronting documented associations, when committees fail to press for transparency, when networks soften their tone toward individuals once scrutinized, public trust verdicts. Trust is not automatic. It is earned through consistent integrity. There is an uncomfortable reality in watching figures once portrayed as defenders of the public shift posture to protect political allies. The betrayal cuts deep because it exposes how fragile convictions can be when proximity to power is involved. Call it hypocrisy, call it opportunism, call it cowardice. But do not call it coincidence without examining the evidence.
Every society faces moments when it must decide whether justice is symbolic or substantive. If files exist, release them responsibly. If investigations remain open, communicate transparently. If crimes were committed, prosecute without fear. Shielding reputations while neglecting victims is not governance. It is complicity. The public deserves clarity. The survivors deserve closure. Children deserve a world where exploitation is pursued relentlessly, not negotiated behind closed doors. It is easy to claim expressed, and it is content to disengage when the machinery of power feels immovable. But silence benefits only those who rely on it. History shows that persistent citizens, not passive observers, shift the trajectory of justice. Continue asking questions, continue demanding transparency, continue centering survivors rather than celebrities. Refuse to let fatigue become surrender. The measure of a nation is not how fiercely it defends the powerless, but how faithfully it protects the powerless.